All right, so we're going to write our first body paragraph, and you'll recall that you've seen this before. This is our alarm table. And for this particular question, we know that it's an explain question, so we're only going to go as far as explain. So we've got to use identify, describe, explain, and do not forget the right-hand side, that vertical column that goes right across. We can use that anywhere, and that's basically our evidence from the Australian economy. Okay, we use that in identify, describe, explain. We can use it anywhere. We have to use it. Absolutely critical. We're going to have a look at that in a moment. I would say that was one of the big criticisms of your essays. Some of the theory was okay, or most of the theory was pretty good, but it was just that, it was theory. And if you look carefully at the question, it asks how it can affect the performance of the Australian economy. So you can do that hypothetically. You can say how it could affect, but it is so much better, so much stronger to be able to say how it has affected. And that's how we get into that really clear, comprehensive, sustained, that A-range response, because we're going to really use the Australian economy thoroughly. In terms of planning though, the first thing is we identify. And so we're going to, this paragraph is our first paragraph we've identified previously. It's an appreciation and it's the negatives of an appreciation, so the negative outcomes of an appreciation. The second thing there is it's about the story of car manufacturing. That's going to be our key evidence, or our key piece of information, I suppose, our key link to the Australian economy. It certainly wasn't the only thing that destroyed the car manufacturing industry in Australia, but it was a contributing factor, and a significant contributing factor. The other contributing factor was the removal of subsidies by the Abbott government. But for our intents and purposes for this essay, it's about the appreciation of the currency. We're not going to say that that was the sole cause, because it wasn't, and we would be inaccurate, but it was a contributing factor, and a contributing factor is a good expression in economics. And the last thing, the relationship there. Now, I've only got the blue there so that the yellow stands out, so ignore the blue, it's just so that the yellow stands out. But we're looking at the relationship. The key relationship is essentially that the high dollar had a negative impact on the car manufacturing industry in that it destroyed it, and in turn it had a negative impact on employment. We had 50,000 people out of work. That's our key relationship. Now, your alarm table does not need to have every single word written into it. It's a way of thinking, it's ideas. So that's all we really need with that table. We just have to make sure that we're going to identify, we're going to describe, and we're going to explain. When we classify stuff, it doesn't really matter if we're describing or we're explaining. Don't get caught up in the minutiae or the fine details. It doesn't matter. Am I describing? Am I explaining? Who cares? As long as it's clear, we're happy. Okay, and so we'll look at that in a moment. Sorry. Now, the last thing I just want to bring your attention to is that, and I've just made that a little bit clearer, use specific evidence from the Australian economy throughout your response. And as I said earlier, that's of critical importance and is not to be ignored in this particular table. And so here's our question. And that's the paragraph we're going to look at. We're going to break down in a moment. All I want to do at the moment is look at that purple. That purple I've highlighted is how I've referred to the Australian economy. Okay, so I've written this paragraph. I've not taken one of yours. I've written this paragraph, and look at how much of that is purple. Okay, most of the paragraph, large chunks, and you could almost highlight the whole paragraph, but large chunks of the paragraph is about really specific information from the Australian economy. I've got when the Australian dollar peaked. I've got the terms of trade reached a 140-year high. I'm talking about how many jobs were lost. I'm talking about Holden. I'm talking about Ford. I've got a $155 million growth fund that the Australian government, in collaboration with state governments, as well as Holden and Ford themselves, have put together to help with this. Okay, we've got people losing their jobs. We've got specific information. And so very soon I'm going to get you to hit pause. And when I do, I'd like you to look at your essay. So look at your own essay that you wrote in the half-yearly exam. And if you did this for, you did the inflation essay, we'll do this for the inflation essay through too. I want you to go through, take a purple pencil so that it lines up, because colours are important, so that it lines up with our colours here. I want you to shade over the top of anywhere in your essay that you have referred specifically to the Australian economy. Okay, not just, you've said Australian economy. You've actually referred to it, not hypothetically, but specifically, something that has happened in the Australian economy. Now, I hope there are lots of parts, but there should be some parts. Then compare it back to mine. See how much you've done compared to how much I've done, and you'll start to get a feel for what I'm talking about. So hit pause now, do that activity, and I'll see you back in a moment. All right, so you've done that activity. Let's move through and let's break down that paragraph and let's look at what we're going to do in writing a paragraph. The first thing we're going to do to write a paragraph is that we're going to identify, and we're going to identify the key content. And so the key content of this paragraph that we said earlier was it's a negative outcomes paragraph from an appreciation of the dollar. And so that's all we're saying here. An appreciation of the Australian dollar can have significant negative effects on various aspects of the Australian economy. Rather than various aspects, because this is all about car manufacturing, we could even get it into our introduction, okay, or our identify sentence, but doesn't matter too much. We then move on and we're going to describe some stuff, okay, and again, describe does not need to be, it doesn't matter if we're describing or explaining if you're not sure which is which, but basically it's going to be the key facts, okay? We're not getting as far as looking at the impacts and the effects of the performance or the impacts on the performance just yet. We're looking at some brief facts. And so the second sentence there, and they usually build up like this, this can be evidence in the period from late 2010 to 2014 when the Australian dollar appreciated to historic highs, peaking at $1.10 US in 2011. And you can get that from the source that's there as well as your own knowledge. So it's good to be able to refer to the sources, and that's what you're doing there. The next bit, and this is the question. The question asks us to explain. So all we've done so far is set up, okay? When you're asked to explain, most of your response has to be explain. When you're asked to describe, you can describe. When you're asked to discuss, discuss. But most of your response, when you shade it or when you highlight it, most of your response should correlate or correspond to whatever the directive term is. And so here you can see just how much yellow we have. Okay, so we've got lots and lots of yellow, and so we should, because we're being asked to explain our movements. Okay. Important point here, and this is something some people did in their essays, we're not being asked about the causes here. This is an effects essay. We're asked on the effects. We're not asked on the causes of the dollar. As such, I would not use diagrams in this essay. The diagrams are the causes of the changes in the dollar. So if you're shifting demand curves and supply curves, that's not really answering the question. You're being asked to explain the impact on the performance of the Australian economy, and that impact is our yellow. That impact is what we've got. The impact is not about the causes. That's not the impact. Okay, so be very clear on that. All right, let's have a look. So this large appreciation saw the price of Australia's exports increase dramatically, impacting negatively on the international competitiveness of the Australian exporters and also important competing industries such as our car manufacturing industry. We're saying to explain here how an appreciation has had a negative impact on international competitiveness. We're going to go into a bit more detail. Okay, so we've got that simultaneously the appreciating currency saw imports fall. Okay, and as a consequence, Australia's terms of trade reached a 140-year high. That's because terms of trade is export price index over import price index. Our exports prices went up, our import prices went down. Therefore, that terms of trade dramatically improved over that period. We can see the high Australian dollar made it difficult for Australian car manufacturers to compete with the rest of the world. We're explaining here because we've got a higher dollar. The higher dollar made it difficult to compete with the rest of the world, as producing cars in Australia was simply not cost effective for large businesses such as Holden and Ford, or Ford and Holden. That's explaining. We're explaining that a higher dollar meant that producing cars in Australia was too expensive. Okay, we're not assuming that knowledge, we're explaining that knowledge. That's what's important. I'm showing my understanding. I'm explaining what has happened. As a result, the appreciation of the currency was a significant contributing factor, there's that term, contributing factor, in the decisions of Ford and Holden to shut down their Australian manufacturing of cars. And so you can see the way I'm explaining the movement has had an impact on the performance of the Australian economy, in this case, the specific industry of car manufacturing. Okay, and you can see the way I'm explaining that. I'm stepping you through it. In a lot of your responses, you just go, students are going from one fact to the next and just skimming over the top. You're not explaining, you're not slowing down, you're not giving me the detail. You're assuming that you're just stating it. Okay, you're saying things like an appreciating dollar will cause a deterioration in international competitiveness. True, but explain it. Go into detail and explain it. The next little bit I've got is just, I think that's probably describing this process took several years with the last factory closing in 2017. And then we move on and we see this last section. Again, it's all yellow. I want it to be yellow. It's an explain question. We need to do an explanation. And so the effect of this on the Australian economy was that approximately 50,000 Australians working directly or indirectly for Holden and Ford were made redundant, okay, or put out of work, were made unemployed. We're not assuming anything, we're explaining it all. We're explaining the impact on the performance of the Australian economy. This creates structural unemployment, okay? And we talk about economic terminology. Obviously, that's economic terminology. Structural unemployment, as the skills of these workers were not suited to the changing landscape of the Australian economy. Okay, we're moving away. There was a mismatch of skills, which is what structural unemployment is. As such, the high Australian dollar has also resulted in increased tense should probably be past tense. It shouldn't be has also resulted. It should be also resulted in increased government spending on transfer payments. Okay, because that's still ongoing. So increased government spending on transfer payments. So that's things like unemployment benefits, as well as programs such as the $155 million growth fund, which is designed to help workers transition from car manufacturing to other types of employment. Okay, I'm explaining the impacts. I'm really going into some detail here about the effects on the performance of the Australian economy. And now we're just going to sum it up, bring it together. Evidently, it is clear that the appreciation of the Australian dollar in the period 2011 to 2014 had significant negative impacts on the performance of the Australian economy. Okay, so hopefully that helps, and we'll have some more videos coming up shortly. Thank you.